Yep, it's recording.
Yes. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our March webinar. I am really excited to introduce our speaker tonight. I went to school with him, so this is somebody that I got to grow up with academically, and now he's off doing really great stuff. But before I do that, I just have a couple quick program announcements. One is that we've been sending out some information about PHP 597. That's an elective that Dr. Lengrich and I are going to be offering this summer. It's a course on the intersection between emergency management and public health, which is an area that I know a lot of people are excited about. So check it out. It's going to be a 3-credit course. It's going to be mostly asynchronous like the rest of our courses, but we are going to have some synchronous sessions where we can talk through some things, have some guest speakers. So we're really, really excited about it. So if you have any questions about registering, please let me know. Speaking of emergency management, thanks to JD and the board of our IAEM student chapter, we are very close to being Penn State official and IAEM official. So that is going to be really exciting when we get that all locked down. But we are going to be having the next student chapter meeting on March 21st, Tuesday, right, JD?
Correct.
Yes, Tuesday, March 21st. And we are going to have the Memphis OEM supervisor as the guest speaker for that. We are not on the 21st, but we are also working with some of our public health science faculty members, Mr. Scott Michelonis and Mr. Bill Dunn, about setting up IAEM exam study groups. So if you're interested in your certification, you're going to be working on your packets, which we can help you with. But this is these are going to be study groups to help prepare for the exams. Next month, our webinar speaker, I still waiting on the final confirmation. It's somebody else that I was lucky enough to go through school with, but he's going to be talking about cyber biosecurity, which is something that we kind of talk about in some of our classes, but there is a whole lot more that is coming up with this field, and we've got somebody who is an expert in it. So I'm very excited to be able to have him come speak. Graduation is coming close. So if you're graduating, request your honor cords. If you're a member of the Order of the Sword and the Shield, make sure you start buying those sooner rather than later, or else they will be sold out. Again, if you are graduating and you are a veteran or you are in the military, make sure that we know about it, because we will get you red, white, and blue honor cords. The Penn State does recognize veterans during the ceremony, so want to make sure that you got them if you deserve them. If you have not responded to Rachel about graduation stuff, make sure you do that, please. But with graduation coming, to get back to my point, we are going to be opening up the school store. So I will be sending out emails about that. Look for those if you want to get yourself some really awesome public health preparedness swag like what JD is wearing. I don't have mine on tonight. In honor of our speaker, I am wearing our George Mason colors. So every other month I'll be wearing Penn State stuff though. Let's see. Last announcement is just a little side note. Dr. Lengrich and I got a poster accepted at the Association for Schools and Programs of Public Health, and it is all about our program and how we are teaching and training people in the field of public health and homeland security, and how we can do awesome things like this webinar series with, how we invite graduates in, how we are doing our IAEM chapter, how we've done some of these interactive electives where we have had graduates come back and help us teach. So we are super proud of the things that our program is doing, and we are really, really happy to be able to go and talk about our program at this conference. Tonight, we are going to have more of an interactive talk. So I'll be checking JD, just feel free to give us a high sound. And one last thing that is not tonight specific, but I know our speaker is going to talk a little bit about this. I was thinking today, as most of you know, I'm in the Coast Guard, and I was just listening to somebody in the military that was talking about how people in the military really are not taught how to network and how to make when you're in the military, every 4 years you get told where to go, and you go there, you do your job, and then a lot of people hit like their retirement age and they're like, oh, you know what, I don't know how to network. And I was thinking about that today because of the way this webinar especially came to be. This is somebody that I went to school with. We stayed in touch on LinkedIn. I don't think you and I have spoken in a few years. I mean, we've
but the
seen what
tie is
each
still
other.
strong.
Exactly. And he posted something great on LinkedIn, which I'm not going to steal his thunder and talk about, but I said, oh my God, this is amazing. This would be really important for my students to hear. I reached out on LinkedIn and said, hey, I haven't talked to you in forever, but can you come speak to my students? He said yes, and now we're all here tonight. But it doesn't matter if you're like mid-career, if you're just starting out, think about networking. I know I talk about LinkedIn a lot because we use it for our program, but it's not just LinkedIn. It's making those school connections and staying in touch. It's things like LinkedIn. It's, when you go to work, making those connections and keeping track of people and making those professional relationships. I mean, tonight it was hey, can you do a webinar for me? But especially talking about public health and emergency management, these might be the people that, oh man, I went to school with somebody 20 years ago who is an expert in this pathogen, or, oh my gosh, this person that I know just went through a similar situation in their EOC. They always say, don't be exchanging business cards at a disaster. So take advantage of those opportunities. We're in a great environment in our classes and everything where we can make these connections. Our webinar speakers are always excited to stay in touch. So if you are not a big networker, or it's not something you've really thought about, I'd recommend giving it some thought and making it more of a priority. Don't be somebody like those people in the military I was talking about who are getting ready to retire and they realize that they don't know how to do that, because it's not something you can do overnight. And it is, I guess it is kind of a skill that does take some getting used to. So I apologize for that really long announcement, but now I'm going to introduce our speaker. So again, Dr. Yong-Bee Lim is somebody that I went to George Mason with. Right now, he's the Deputy Director of the Converging Risks Lab, an institute of the Council on Strategic Risks, which focuses on research and policy development that brings together multiple sectors to study emerging, converging, and evolving risks in a rapidly changing world. In his multiple roles across CSR over the past 3 years, he has focused on understanding the current state of play of how the United States and its partners are addressing biological threats. This includes activities ranging from understanding the current state of early warning and disease surveillance approaches to supporting and leading domestic and international engagement with key stakeholders across the biological threat community. He has previously worked as a researcher and an analyst at several U.S. government institutions, including HHS ASPR, DOE, and DoD, on work ranging from biological and cybersecurity threats to understanding how technology and information is changing the landscapes of life sciences benefits and risks. Again, he holds his doctorate and master's degree in biodefense with a specialization in terrorism and homeland security studies from George Mason, and he got his bachelor's in psychology also from George Mason. So thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. Also from the UK in the middle of the night. So we really, really appreciate you being here and your time tonight.
No, really appreciate being here, and thank you so much for the invitation, Dr. Osatek. I'll call you Jen from now on because we're colleagues, but wanted to make sure to give a shout out to your title. It is a well-earned title, and really thrilled to see how far you've come too in terms of when we first met and engaged with each other. So as Jen mentioned, I'm currently the Deputy Director at the Converging Risks Lab at the Council on Strategic Risks, which is essentially a DC-based security think tank institute, where we do a lot of the work that Jen just talked about. So we understand that a lot of these threats ranging from nuclear, chem and bio to climate change and ecological security can't just be considered within silos. Actually, they all intersect in some way, fashion, or form with each other. So we're trying to address that complexity as we make recommendations to and educate stakeholders, within the DC politic, I suppose. As well as other international leaders as well. So the LinkedIn post that Jen is alluding to is I had the incredible opportunity this past November, December, to attend the Biological Weapons Convention's review conference. So the Biological Weapons Convention, just really briefly, it's a disarmament treaty. It currently has 185 countries. I think South Sudan just joined maybe a week or two ago. And it is essentially a disarmament treaty that prohibits the research, development, and scaling and production and use of biological weapons. So the use of pathogens, disease-causing agents, in a nefarious or attack way to using disease as a weapon, essentially. And so this treaty was implemented. It was started in 1972. So this past year was actually its 50th year anniversary. So a very significant and momentous time within the history of the treaty, but also given the Russian invasion of Ukraine and also the massive disinformation campaign from Russia concerning the U.S. involvement in these alleged biolabs and breaking the rules of the Biological Weapons Convention. There was a lot more at stake when it came to this particular meeting, and everybody from the non-governmental organization community to the states parties really felt that. And so essentially, I got to go along with a number of my team from November through parts of December to where the magic happens, which is in Geneva, and states parties convened there to essentially talk about and consider the state of biological weapons, to talk about what are ways to strengthen the convention, to talk about how to increase implementation associated with that particular treaty. And ultimately, at the end, the thing you're looking for is a final consensus document of this is the path forward that we're going to take to try to make this treaty continue working. There was a lot of concern, of course, because I believe it was either June or July, that was when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty had its review conference. And when they were trying to generate a final document there, Russia ended up not signing the document. And so there was a lot of concern that a similar thing would happen in this particular review conference. So there was a lot at stake, essentially. And there were a number of things that people were writing online. I wrote a piece as well for the bulletin on is there any hope, really, in the negotiation process, given the geopolitical gridlock and everything like that? And I think mine was fairly optimistic and turned out to be right in that there was some measured achievement, which was increasing the number of staff for the implementation support unit for the Biological Weapons Convention, which literally does all of the work in terms of engaging states parties, educating states parties, doing all of those logistics, getting these documents all in line for these meetings, which is a huge amount of work. And now they have gone from a very, very mighty but tiny size of 3 staff to 4. So 1 was added. So hey, you know what? That's a 33% increase, and I think that's fantastic. So going as an NGO is a really interesting experience because the main players, of course, are the states parties. They're the ones that are actually engaging, discussing, and trying to figure out solutions and work through diplomatic channels and conversations to arrive at that particular positive end goal. The role of NGOs there predominantly is to be observers. So they have no real say, no real vote, but we are allowed to observe as members of civil society to see what's happening, offer any particular like subject matter expertise if that would be helpful in throughout the process, or engage with delegates potentially to see if there are particular ideas or things that might be of interest. So that's predominantly the role there, to be kind of representative and observers from civil society to this particular, large event. And I'm gonna cut this part fairly short because I'm still processing. I know it's been a few months, but I'm still processing my experience there because it was very surreal. I've been involved in the kind of BW space in terms of researching and understanding how to address BW issues for over a decade now, which is kind of wild to me. It's a little bit strange to say that, but I've wanted to go for the longest time, and the fact that I was finally able to go at such a momentous occasion is still something that I'm processing. But I think the main things, and this is going to tie in a little bit with what Jen was talking about earlier about networking, is people want to engage and people want to talk. And you want to make sure you're respectful of people's time, but you also want to shoot your shot. And so taking those opportunities during these types of events where essentially everyone that's anyone within the biosecurity, biosafety context is a prime networking opportunity, to be able to connect with people, to be able to engage and discover what makes people tick, what people are passionate about, and then finding those ways to use those conversations as initial steps to build bridges to then see if there's other possibilities for future collaboration, other areas where we might be able to support each other, make movement in some of these spaces. And then the other real main thing too is I think everybody gets a little bit nervous when they're in these kinds of new contexts, especially someplace that's kind of storied and historic like Geneva and within the United Nations. And I had the great privilege, this is probably what Jen was referring to give the Council on Strategic Risks statement at the Biological Weapons Convention, so an NGO statement from our organization. And it was simultaneously the most invigorating and the most terrifying, I think, experience that I'd ever had. And I think part of that was because we're all going through a process of growth as we develop in our careers. And the fact that I had never imagined that this was an opportunity that I would be able to do, but I find myself in this position to do it, I think is a it really works out to be one of those situations where just say yes. I think when these opportunities present themselves, no matter how anxious you are or how nervous you might be, say yes, because that anxiety, that discomfort is growth. And that's you growing into new and very interesting and unexpected ways. And I definitely experienced that with this, and hope, other people, that view this when they experience those types of situations do similarly. So how does the BWC here and me kind of going off on these tangents connect to part of the reason why I wanted to, have this conversation with Jen and JD and Kevin tonight? Well, because one of the things about my career is it makes no sense in a lot of ways. So as Jen noted, my initial degree for undergrad was in psychology. I had a particular emphasis on social anxiety kind of studies and disorders, and also biopsychology. So like you, Jen, who did neuro, I also did a fair amount of sacrificing of rats as well. Um, so we have that in common too. Um, and of course, the reason I went into psychology was to figure out what was wrong with me, which I still haven't. But at the same time, it was also because, that was an area that I thought I could excel in. It was also kind of one of those career choices that seemed, fairly robust until all of these kind of news articles and things said how psychology is one of the worst degrees that you could possibly go for. There's no job prospects. And so I started getting a little nervous. I got into a few graduate programs, but I thought maybe I'll take a beat and I'll figure out if there's something else that I wanted to do. And just by happenstance during that taking a beat, so I took a year and just worked during that time. I went to a used bookstore in the DuPont Circle area, and I decided to look through the international relations section for some reason, and I found a book on international ethics written by a local professor named Dr. Francis Harbour, who happened to, at that point, be the acting director of the biodefense program. And this wasn't my background, this wasn't my history, but I really fell in love with the book. I thought it was very, thought-provoking. It was really interesting. And ultimately, I ended up emailing her and we ended up having a conversation, and she convinced me to join the biodefense program as a master's student. So that was my initial foray into understanding that there's a history where people tried to develop biological weapons and tried to deploy them. And the weaponization of disease is far more historic than we can possibly imagine. And simultaneously less scary, but also more scary than I could have ever imagined either. The program, as Jen might note, is definitely a study in contrasts, and it definitely teaches you to expand your thinking. And while I was a student, I decided to also take the opportunity being in DC. That's one of the advantages also in terms of networking. Think about what your geography is and see if there are any particular opportunities you could have to leverage your geography to get certain types of experiences or skill sets while you're there. But in DC, obviously, one of the best things is, the government is based there essentially, the federal government. So I took the opportunity to work as, an assistant at HHS Asper, which was super fun. It was really challenging. I happened to go in 2012. And I don't know if people remember 2012, but it was a pretty busy year. So that was Superstorm Sandy, that was Sandy Hook, that was the Boston Marathon bombing. So there was a lot of stuff happening. And as a lowly assistant, to have to cover calls for my office, because we were a small but mighty team at the at-risk behavioral and community resilience team at HHS Asper, you got to fill a lot of shoes. So there were a lot of opportunities there just because there was a lot of stuff happening. So again, say yes to those opportunities as you can. And then, having gotten that experience and that perspective, I took more time and I ended up getting into the PhD program at George Mason University. And during that time, and Jen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the PhD process is a very odd process in the sense that you're really trying to figure out what it is that you are the most interested in and how to hone that to a research question that is meant to fill some sort of a gap. And you can, yeah, I'll add this conversation in here. So I asked Dr. Greg Koblenz, who is the associate professor and the director of the biodefense program now, to be my dissertation chair, and he was happy to do that. His problem with me, and I mean this in the most lighthearted of ways because he's an exceptionally generous and wonderful person. We have a fantastic relationship. was I had this tendency to keep changing topics. Which was very frustrating for him because he wanted to eventually get me out of the program. But that wasn't happening. But my path has never been direct. I've always been very taken with very interesting topics that just happened to come my way. I'd become very interested. And that was actually one of the most amazing opportunities for me was when I got to go to Lawrence Livermore National Lab as a fellow and work as a part of their bio program at the Center for Global Security Research, which is run by Dr. Brad Roberts. And during my 7 months out there, I met some amazing fellows. We created a number of papers that we presented together at the 4S conference on democratized technologies, small modular reactors, political regimes and their effect on technology innovation. Like it was this absolute amazing experience where I learned so much, I grew so much, and I had the opportunity to grow with other people. And that I think also the other element of that is it was really hard to, because in the PhD phase, we're so siloed. And we tend to be very, very distant from other colleagues. So being able to have those conversations with people was absolutely amazing, to have that space at DOE. And then ultimately after that, while I was working on my PhD, at least up to my proposal, I worked at the National Defense University at the Center for the Studies of Weapons of Mass Destruction, where I worked as a researcher on emerging and converging technology issues, the digitization of biology, as well as a number of other projects as well that related to, bio. And I can imagine, as I'm talking about this, I can imagine people going, why did you go to all these different places? There seems to be no rhyme or reason. And that's true. There really was no rhyme or reason outside of these have things to do with bio. But I think the lesson that I learned eventually that worked for me was taking an approach of being open to opportunity and understanding that these opportunities are being presented to me for a reason, and there's always something for me to learn in these spaces, so I should say yes. And that's somehow through all of those kind of what seems like random chance yes indicators, I am now in the nonprofit sector, in the NGO sector, working on subjects that I love. And it didn't necessarily start off as I knew I wanted to work on these topics, but it was a process that allowed me to really appreciate the things that I work on. And I think that's another thing too, as people are trying to figure out, if I'm a public health person, I should go to CDC because that makes the most sense. Or if I'm an emergency preparedness person, I should go to FEMA because that makes the most sense. The skill sets directly apply. Yeah, that can be true. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. I think that's 100% what you should do. But if you're concerned thinking, well, I'm an emergency preparedness person, but I want to go to CDC, or, I want to go to even DOE, or other places, or if you're a public health person and you think I want to find a way to DHS or someplace different, there are pathways. There are pathways, and the skills don't always have to be exact. In fact, sometimes it really helps to have complementary skills to make sure that when we're looking through policy and implementation, the more diverse perspectives there are and the more diverse experiences there are, the less likely we are to have gaps as we address these exceptionally complex and exceptionally impactful things that we look at. So on that note, what I'm going to do at this point is I open the floor. Let me know if that was hopefully that there was some semblance of order within that chaos, and just would, love to have a conversation if, on anything that I might have said, or, anything else.
It was great. Thank you for that. And I actually have one thing that I really want to ask right off the bat. So a lot of people are really interested in the federal hiring process, getting into the federal government, and those are great opportunities. We have many resources to help with federal resumes, all that kind of great stuff. We really haven't been able to talk to anybody from an NGO perspective. So can you talk a little bit about like how you would go about finding, like how you found this, and what are the benefits of, or not even like benefit deficit, but what's different, and like why do you enjoy working at an NGO as opposed to a different sort of position?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And I think to answer your first one, so how I found this position was actually through networks. So
I
I
didn't sound
had
him to say that. That was just
no, no, it's a common recurring theme, because I think that people often underestimate the power of networks, because there's several ways of thinking about it. I think some people think, well, I want to get to where I want to get to on my own merit. And 100%, you shouldn't skimp on the work. You should, definitely put forth good effort and produce great products to really highlight that you are the right person for X position or Y position. But networks not only allow you to kind of connect with people and get maybe deeper perspectives on particular places you might not know as well, but networks are also ways for people to go, hey, there's this job position that opened in my organization, and I remember this one person who I thought would be really good for this type of position. So that's one of the reasons why networking is also just really important. So one of my colleagues had noted that this position had opened and that I should take a look at it. So it was for a fellow position at my current organization. And I was also under that very amorphous but weird PhD ticking clock, where you realize you have 4, 5 months left, and you should probably find a job. Um, so it was just really serendipitous. Like, the timing was really great. I put in an application. CSR is really great in the fact that we really try to reduce bias when we're going through these types of processes. So when you connect with us, we won't be as likely to talk about things outside of what's in the form, as well as what's in the call for applications, just because we want to make sure that everyone that applies has the same information, to make sure that there isn't some sort of perceived favoritism. And then there are also bias reduction measures that we take in other ways too. So I think that that's a very, very interesting and good system that we use. But I happened to be very fortunate and was offered the position, which I accepted. And so yeah, that's how I ended up, learning about the position was through my network. So I think that's a really important thing to consider. And I apologize. What was your second question again?
so. I didn't want this to be like a positive negative thing, but what are
Oh, right.
some benefits that you found of working at an NGO as opposed to
Mhm.
different sorts of positions?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question as well. And I think within the NGO space, what's really fantastic is the research opportunities in particular are really great. So NGOs are spaces, at least, the way that we operate is we're really about engaging with communities and educating key stakeholders on, very topical issues related to biological weapons, nuclear issues,
Like
things like
who?
that. People on the Hill, so people that are key stakeholders in parts of the interagency So, engaging in conversations and, doing that type of educative element to make sure that, the people that are making key decisions related to, say, like biodefense, have the right information and the key information that they need to make informed decisions. So yeah, it's really great that way. You have the space to be able to do research and analysis, which is something that is very appealing, compared to, I think, a number of other jobs. It's very much, you have a particular set of marching orders and you are there to execute them, based upon, the vision of the boss, or things like that. And it's less research and much more implementation, which, again, there's a role for that. And personally speaking, sometime down the line, just for my personal education, I would love to be more involved in the implementation process as well, within a particular position, say in the federal government, or in some other location. But yeah, the key thing really is, if you're really interested, I think, in research and understanding the importance of things like educating key stakeholders, NGOs are definitely a fantastic place to be, and they're a fantastic resource for, those individuals and groups that are looking to, better understand the issues.
Do you have anything, JD? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, what does an average day in your life look like on the job? I mean, granted, not at 1 o'clock in the morning in London, but
no, that's a really great question. So I think, well, sometimes it depends, but an average day, so, given the fact that I manage, or, support and managing people at the organization, I guess my average day pretty much looks like 4 or 5 main activities. The first is doing my daily reading, to make sure that I am caught up with as much of the issues that I can be.
now, is that reading coming from reports from other people in your organization? Is it periodicals? I mean, what kind of reading?
So typically I have a Google search set up, for keywords. So biodefense, policy, biosecurity, and then there are a number of other keywords that I have tagged. So looking to see what out of that, kind of passes muster. So, a bit of, periodicals, a number of the, peer, peer-reviewed journal articles, and then, yeah, occasionally, reports as well, or if there are particular things that are coming out, that we should have an eye on, or that will be very impactful, that we should be analyzing. For example, kind of, like the president's budget proposal, that should be dropping. Hope, we'll see when it drops. But also, in the biospace, still waiting on the bioposture review, which is the first of its kind to kind of look at how, the Department of Defense is, fully engaged in and implementing, biodefense policy and implementation, across the entirety of DoD. So, whether it's key things or whether it's informational things, that's generally what I do in terms of reading. I also try to set up a little bit of time, whether it's my personal time, or, a little bit here and there of writing, because it's kind of important to be producing, and making sure that thoughts and perspectives get out there. And, writing is one of those convenient vehicles to be able to do that in a succinct way. The third thing typically tends to be making sure that, the team has everything that they need to be successful in implementing, their mission. So, whether it's, making sure that we have visibility meetings, to ensure that people know across the team what all's going on in the biospace, and making sure that, people aren't over or under stressed when it comes to kind of the work distribution, to doing one-on-ones with individual team members to make sure that they're kind of reaching their growth goals, and really discussing those to make sure that they have the tools they need to be able to continue making progress in that way. And then I think, like all of us, Zoom meetings. A lot of life nowadays is Zoom meetings. So and those are great because I think that they offer a geographically neutral way for people to convene in ways that we might not historically have been able to. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I can't afford, tickets constantly to try to go to The Hague to listen in on an OPCW thing, or, those types of things. So the fact that a lot of the stuff is online, it's great because you get to participate and listen in on things that you historically haven't been able to. But at the same time, my leg does fall asleep after my fourth consecutive hour of Zoom meetings, which I'm sure is something that all of us experience.
So I got a standing desk, so yeah.
That's smart. So yeah, that's typically how my day is divided. On occasion too, again, going towards the networking thing, always making sure to try to find time and space to meet people, whether it's for a virtual coffee, or try to meet in person, as we all continue to deal with our individual risk tolerances in relations to COVID, as well as other respiratory diseases and everything that's happening right now. But yeah, just making sure that you continue to grow your network, stay connected, and just be engaged, because all of these people that you're engaged and engage them in a legitimate and honest way, not just as a kind of, at least personally for me, I really try to avoid, I don't approach people in a way that's just really transactional. I think that's not genuine, and I also think that that's it's very poor form, at least in my personal opinion. Not judging people that do, because people will do what works best for them, but I think that we face so many issues in a lot of the spaces that we all operate in, and good faith is the way forward in terms of the community building and making sure that we're all working towards, even if our recommendations aren't all the same, we're all at least working towards the same common goal.
Do you have something, JD?
So I mean, you mentioned COVID. I mean, do you handle things like making recommendations on how to deal with misinformation? I mean, when the COVID thing broke out, there was, yes, it was a weapon, no, it's not a weapon, yes, it's a weapon, no, it's not a weapon, and I mean, it's still happening today. So do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And what I can say is that, as I mentioned, we do educative engagement with key stakeholders. And there have been, especially when the war in Ukraine broke out, the invasion of Ukraine happened, there was also significant concern about false flag operations, potentially the use of BW, given the Soviet Union and now Russia's previous history with, relationship with biological weapons. And so we would generate products and, distribute them to make sure that people had like the proper right information and the context to arrive at informed decisions when it came to that. So yes, we as well as I'm sure other NGOs were very much involved in making sure that there was proper context put on a lot of these types of issues.
You had mentioned writing. So, I mean, we always encourage students. Our program is more of a professional studies program than the program that we went through. but we do have students that are interested in writing and getting published and presenting. So are there any places that you can like recommend looking into if students want to get published or want to present, or are there any opportunities where you are?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the interesting thing, you noted it sounded a little bit like um, our degree was, a bit more academic, and I suppose it was. Its initial bent was a little bit more professional program, at least when I first started. It was a very odd hybrid kind of experience in that way. And then I think it slowly transitioned to something a little bit different, which is much more what you were talking about.
So
Um,
for, not to interrupt, but for a little bit of background, the program that we went through, it was actually started by Ken Alabek, who was a former Russian bioweaponeer. And it was going, he eventually left George Mason, and the program went through a lot of change.
mhm,
When I started, it was kind of, it had just come from the bio program kind of to a more international affairs, and it kind of got bounced all over the place for a while. So what he and I experienced was a very academic research program that was in a lot of flux. So
mhm.
it was kind of like finding its feet while we were going through.
Right, exactly. So, in terms of recommendations for writing, I would be very curious to see if UPenn has resources like that in terms of, are there particular publications at UPenn that might be, interested in the type of writing that you're talking about? If we're talking about broader, I think that one of the things that I often say is make sure you also have good relationships with your advisors and your instructors, especially the ones that you think are particularly great and that you'd love to collaborate with. And this is one of those opportunities where you can go, especially if you know that they have they have a history of writing. You could reach out to them and go, hey, I have an idea, and I would love to write something with you, or I would love to find an opportunity to be able to put this kind of idea out. Do you think it's a good idea? And, do you think that there are particular avenues to be able to pursue that? And more often than not, professors are there to and they want to help. They want to help and make sure that their students are continuing to grow and being given the opportunities to be able to fulfill that growth. So, reach out to your advisors as well. I would also say, depending on the topic area, and as you kind of develop again your network, it doesn't hurt to start trying to reach out to editors at particular types of publications, and seeing if there's interest in an idea that you have or something that you want to write. So I happen to be very fortunate to be an editorial fellow at the Bulletin in its inaugural year of doing that. And the initial goal was to write 10 articles across 12 months. It turned out to be more like 4. Well, the invasion of Russia, the Russian invasion happened in Ukraine, and there was just all sorts of stuff going on. But there are, do a little bit of research and see if there's a distinct publication that sounds like it's right up the alley for you, and see, read some of the samples of it and see, is there something that I feel like I can contribute in this space? And don't give into imposter syndrome. Like, think about a way to, because if normally I find that if people think that there's a good idea there, you might need to refine it, you might need to shape it, you might need to work it out with a few people, but there's probably something good there. So if you're interested in that route, I would just say do some of the relevant research to make sure that you're looking for either you're in an institution publication, or a specialized publication that focuses on the kind of areas that you're focused on. Read a little bit about what kind of products they produce, and see how your product may possibly fit into that particular publication.
Thanks.
So you said your doctoral program was very individual. You didn't go through a cohort, or? No.
So Jen and I initially met because we met at a kind of orientation type-ish event, right?
So in 2012, I was finishing up my coursework. My son was born that year. Actually, I was pregnant because it was a morning and they had donuts there. And I remember they slid the box across the table and they're like, it's early morning, let the pregnant lady have donuts. That was actually Trevor. He's the one who slid the donuts across the table. So
That makes sense.
when I was going through the program, you know, they had a number of like open houses and things like that where they would let students come talk. And I believe it was Yumi and Saskia who were doing that. And so no, there was no cohort, to answer your question. People kind of like here, you know, people kind of went through together at times, and you kind of saw the same faces, and then people would kind of, I don't want to say like pair off, but you know, I was eligible for a credit reduction because I had this master's from Penn State, and I didn't take it because there were a bunch of really interesting classes, and it ended up working out great because I ended up like adopting a study buddy who was local, and I graduated 5 years ago now, and he and I still talk multiple times a week. We just co-wrote a book chapter. I mean, when I was doing my dissertation, he read more chapters of that thing than anybody on the face of this planet. I always joke that that he and I should have co-written 2 dissertations instead of us each writing one, because we spent so much time helping the other one. So not a cohort, but it was kind of like an organic group, kind of like what I said, what we see here. But yeah, no official cohort program.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could try to create one, but it really depended on schedule and synergy, I think, was ultimately what it came down to. But I think the positive thing is, if you were looking to find someone, you probably could find someone.
Yeah,
And it was
weird.
funny because Dr. Harbour, who he was talking about, was amazing. Unfortunately, she's since passed away. But I remember when we started, she was talking about finding a study group and, you know, finding people to go through, and especially when it came time for the comprehensive exams and everything. And I was like, study groups like that? No, that sounds painful, and no. And then, like I said, I found a study buddy. I was talking about him a few weeks ago, and I called him my academic big brother, which I guess makes me the annoying little sister. But but I don't know how I would have finished it without him, to be honest. Just having somebody, like, I would literally send him emails. Hey, this is an idea I have this sentence and I'm stuck. Help me. And he would, you know, fill it in. He read, you know, tons of drafts and tons of ideas, and, you know, we would just Zoom for an hour and brainstorm and stuff like that. So again, not an official part of anything, but definitely a benefit that I thought was crazy when I was told about it, and now I am a believer.
Right. 100%.
Okay. I was gonna say one thing that I always try to, I know that you had a very different path. I mean, I get it. I was a neuroscience person and then found this Penn State program. Literally, I was accepted to a different, it was a national security program, and my dad had gone to a conference at Penn State Hershey and was randomly telling somebody about what I was doing, and they handed him a brochure for this program and said, has your daughter looked at this program? And I have not left. So So convoluted path, but it got you to where you want to be. Not that you would change anything, but if you could like talk to yourself 15 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow. That is always that's a really hard question to answer because there's so many things you want to do, right? Like you want to say, no, don't do that one thing, or yes, this is amazing. First, yeah, echoing what you said, I would not change any of the experiences that I've had because they've shaped me into the person that I am, and I think that that's great. I think one of the things that often people deal with, and everyone I think is either shy to talk about it or don't want to acknowledge it, is the kind of specter of imposter syndrome, and the anxiety that comes from it. And I think if I were to go to the past, and I still deal with that. I mean, let's completely be honest. You
I'll
know,
second that.
yeah. And so, for me, I think if I could go back to the past and talk to myself, I would say at different stages, you're learning, you're growing, and don't let the imposter syndrome stop you from taking advantage of opportunities. I know it sounds like I said yes to every opportunity and I was completely fine with it, but no, every one of those was actually very nerve-wracking because I wasn't sure what this would get me. I wasn't sure if I would, be able to adapt to these different environments. But at the end of the day, they were pretty cool experiences. And so if I'd let my anxiety take and my imposter syndrome take hold of me during those moments, I would have lost out on some pretty amazing experiences. And so I would probably say don't let the anxiety stop you from things. Don't waste your energy on that. Just say yes and then accept that you can control what you can control and just go with it.
Going off of what you just said, my academic big brother I was talking about, I found this posting on LinkedIn one day and I sent it to him, and he was like, he was retiring from his career and was looking for some opportunities. I sent it to him and he emailed me back and he said, "You putting in for it?" And I said, "No, like this was for you." I had not even, and I wasn't looking for something, like I was in a really great place at that point. So and he said, "You're more qualified for this position than I am, right?" And it was like I hit a brick wall. I read it, never even thought about myself. I immediately thought of him and I was like, "Oh, he'd be perfect for this." And then when he said that, it was like, wow. Like,
Right.
actually, I went back through and I read it and I was like, wow, I do meet all of these. And I had not even, thinking about myself was not even anywhere in the spectrum of what I was thinking. And that was like a really big light bulb, like I said, because that was a big, like, hello.
JD, you have a story like that?
You're muted.
No, I was distracted with looking up doctoral programs.
I told you. I told you. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, if I could do it without having to work full time, that would be good.
There are programs like that.
Yeah.
So our master's program is online, offered through our World Campus, but Penn State does have a DRPH program, and now we have a certificate program. Well, we have two certificate programs. We have a master's program, and we also present it as also you can take our program and take some electives to get to the DRPH program. So we had a number of students that were looking for that pathway to a doctoral program. So we were really excited about that. And also going with your background conversation, this is totally an aside, but when I was having that conversation about the DRPH program with the people on our public health sciences side, there were 4 people in the meeting. We were all doctors. None of us had the same degree. We had a veterinarian, I was a PhD, we had a DRPH, and we had an EdD. So, you know, when you're thinking about careers and thinking about where you want to be, I mean, we were all sitting in the same Penn State meeting, working on public health science education, and we had come at it from very, very different perspectives. So that's just another, you know, another piece of evidence that, you know, you can kind of make your own path and then make it what you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is no direct path. Like, you know, your experiences shape you, and then the experiences then also shape what you're looking for. And so the thing that I often recommend to people, again, taking a page from the advice to myself of 15 years ago, is like listen to your gut and appreciate what it's telling you, in terms of, well, this experience was great and I think I want more of this, versus this experience was not optimal. There were things that I could do without, or, you know, but it was a growth experience. It was a learning experience. So all of the experiences are great because they also help you calibrate what direction you may want to go, based upon the various experiences that you have. So I think that's another key, and a key thing for people to keep in mind too. It's an iterative process. So honestly, trust yourselves more.
So you're managing people. Are you looking for people who have master's degrees or doctorates in the field? Or because I mean, when I go to the emergency management conference, I get a lot of people. I get a lot of mixed messages. Some people say if I see a master's on their resume, I don't even look at them.
Mm-hmm.
Some are like, nope, I need to have I need them to have a doctorate or something, you know. So it's
Right.
very mixed messages.
So it's really dependent on the positions that are open at any given point. So, you know, we have hired people that, you know, are entry level, you know, they've just gotten their bachelor's degree, all the way to people that have, you know, a higher you know, a graduate level degree and that have served for a significant number of years in, say, you know, the US Navy, for example. So it really is dependent on, you know, what our needs are at that time. But we haven't had a particular issue where we're like, oh, you know, they have this degree or they don't have this degree, so we'll not consider them. No, like we're looking to see who are the best candidates for the position given what the requirements are, and that's really what it comes down to.
The other thing I think going along with that is that our program being a professional studies program, and I mean absolutely no disrespect to a straight academic program, but the type of students that are in our program bring a lot to the table. They bring their master's degree to the table, but they also have that professional experience. So a lot of times, like, I think the people that were telling you, oh, when I see a master's degree, it's like, no, that's probably somebody who has been faced with a number of people that just bring academic experience, have no boots on the ground, and are still really, really green. So for somebody like you, you've got professional experience, you've got real world experience, and you know that's what so many of our students bring. So I wouldn't expect you to run into that, oh, master's degree, no, because that's not all you are.
Right. Yeah, the experiential component is really important here too. So, you know, especially if you're looking for someone, you know, whenever you join a new organization, there's always like a growth curve, like there's a learning curve, right? So you kind of have to understand the organization, you have to understand how people operate there, you know, things like that. But if you're looking for someone that is a little less fresh and a little bit more like ready to plug and play out of the box, you are looking for that combination of like does the education and the experience that they have match up with what we're looking for? And if that, if that's a perfect marriage, then obviously like that's amazing. So it really depends, again, I think really on the need and the bandwidth for training and the kind of addressing the learning curve type issues. But sometimes we want someone that we can plug into the system and just play right out of the box. And that's where I think some of the experiential and again, networking components can be really, really handy.
One more question. I know it's past 2 a.m. for you, but so in your research and in your daily job, do you use GIS information? And if so, where do you get it from?
So I haven't used GIS in a really long time. That isn't really a part of my job, at least for right now. So I used to do some of that work. So Dr. Koblenz, so Greg Koblenz, he's a jack of all trades when it comes to WMD stuff. Like he has his kind of hand in everything. And so when I was a graduate research assistant for him, I had to use GIS to map out where chemical incidents happened during a particular time period in Syria. And I'm trying to remember what I used. I might have just even used like a whole bevy of Google tools at that time. And it actually worked out really well. Like you could see from the map that it was interesting. The attack patterns were along a very specific highway. And you tracked it by date and time and everything. And it was, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I thought it was pretty decent work. There are other people actually that are, leveraging that type of kind of tool, especially in the open source intelligence kind of work to better understand in a variety of ways that have implications for public health, that have implications for biodefense and biosecurity. So there's definitely a lot of interest, and I think there's a lot of buzz in the space to use more of that type of tool to kind of monitor and surveil and potentially detect things. And I think also there's a lot of hype and I think a lot of interest because of the potential applications of that type of technology in relations with the use of AI, for example. But yeah, it's that was a long way of saying I haven't done that type of work in a while, but there was one example where I did use it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, I know it is really, really late, so I will I appreciate the fact that you came and spoke tonight or this morning for you, and that you stayed so far after 9 on, well, 9 for me. I know JD's in Central Time, so I always make fun of him. But thank you so much for coming tonight. This was great. I appreciate all of the information on NGOs and the BWC. And for everybody else, hopefully we will see you on March 21st for IAEM and April 1st for our next Penn State webinar or PHP webinar. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it tonight. Tonight was great.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And no, really appreciate the opportunity. And also, if anyone is interested in my organization or want to talk further, Jen has my contact information. So more than happy to talk with people based off of this call or any other things.
Great.
Find you on
Thank
LinkedIn
so
and network.
Yes. Thank you,
Fantastic.
everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.